Okay, happy Wednesday, folks. And those of you who know me, I'm Will, and you see somebody who's on screen with me, Cristina Ambroselli. So I'm really super excited to have this conversation today. And I am going to ask everybody who's watching to introduce themselves, say hi in the comments, and let us know where you're tuning in from. This broadcast is live. It's available on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and as well as the replay. So type in where you're tuning in from and also let us know if you are team live or team replay. So today, our topic is career breaks. Now, Cristina, full disclosure here, Cristina and I know each other for a very long time. We worked together for a very long time. And Cristina took a career break, something that not everybody always does. So I thought, as she was talking about getting ready to go back out there on stage, right? You can hit the road again. This is a great topic because so many people really and truly are interested in doing things in a new way. But before I turn the mic over to Cristina, and we'll have to fight for the mic because when we work together, I talk a lot. I know all of you know that, but she's not shy to take the mic away. I want to set this up. Cristina, 3 years ago, right around now, in this very room, live, I'm coming to all of you live from Rio de Janeiro, I had a conversation with you. We were working together, and you told me to be prepared because when I came back to New York, there was this virus thing happening, and that we're not sure if we're going to stay open. And I thought, okay, I was on Vacation Glow. New York has gone crazy. The world is crazy. What's this all about? So fly home. The world closed. Then 2 years ago, you and I were in the midst of reopening, vaccines, running the Met, working with other cultural institutions in New York City. And the world just seems so dark and heavy and unbelievable. 1 year ago, I had already left the Met for months. By that point, you and I had a conversation that you too were ready to leave the Met. And so I think it's really interesting to look at the last 3 years, everything that we've been through. I made some changes in my life because of the last 3 years. You have made changes in your life because of the last 3 years, different reasons, different stages in life. Today, I want the audience, and hopefully I will look while you're speaking, I'll see who's joined us today. I really want to understand from you what it is that prompted you to take this life change, why you're doing it, and what your next steps are. So let me go see who's joined us. And Cristina, introduce yourself beyond anything I just said.
Thanks so much. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here talking about this because I think it's so important that we realize that there are moments in our life where we have to evaluate where we are and what we're doing. And like so many thousands, millions of other people, the pandemic definitely was the trigger for so many to say, is this where I want to be? And what direction do I need to go in next? And I can't even believe it's been 3 years either. It seems crazy that this all started 3 years ago. But I spent an amazing 12 years at the Met. That's where Will and I got to know each other and work together. And, we got to do so many incredibly exciting things as part of the reopening of the museum, as part of navigating through the challenges of the pandemic. They were super fulfilling, super exciting to do all of that stuff. But it was also, a lot. It was very draining. And I was a working parent. I had 2 kids at home. I think when the pandemic started, my youngest was still in those like baby walkers and was still eating baby food. And so to have 2 kids at home, the schools were closed, the daycares were closed, and working through all of that, it was a lot of balls up in the air. It was a lot to juggle. And I say this as someone who had an incredible support network. I had immediate family nearby to help with the kids, while I was in back-to-back Zoom meetings, trying to figure out how to reopen this incredible institution to the public. I had people helping me with the kids, helping with virtual, my son was doing virtual kindergarten classes at the time, which is even bananas to think of a kindergartner doing virtual school, but that was the reality. And so after all of that, I came to a point where I looked at everything I was able to do at the Met, at the museum, and realized that, you know what, I feel so good about what I've been able to accomplish. And I just needed to take a breath, and take a moment away from work to figure out what I wanted to do next.
This is again, everybody who's watched these before knows I don't have scripts. I thought about this morning, and when I think about all that I admire about you, Cristina, right? You're stable, you're thoughtful, you're strategic, you're just this calm, centered person. I'm not normally. I'm like the opposite. I chase energies, and very different. So most of us, and especially what we did, because when you think about reopening cultural institutions and being part of something that was so historic and so big, we were dealing with people's lives. We were frightened, we were scared, and it was. I think it just changed us. So all of those pressures um, worked itself on. It worked on us. When I think about the difference between my leaving and changing and having a career break, well, I didn't take the break, and that was the problem. Having a career break and doing something new versus you making the decision. Months ago, I think I was having some sort of like stress attack, anxiety attack, and I reached out to you. You may remember this, and I hope you don't mind, thinking, okay, the perfect person to help me with this project would be Cristina. And I so admired where you were just like, yeah, right. Well, I'm on a career break. Career break means no work.
Yeah.
And I admire that so much. How did you have that discipline? Because my intention was like to stop, but because I'm drawn to energies and I'm drawn to people, I kept saying yes. And I know I said yes to too many things. What was the secret? How did you know I'm doing this and I'm not going to take the next step until? How did you do that?
Yeah. So I think when early on, when I knew that I was leaving the museum, originally in my head, and I think we spoke about this, Will, I was like, I just need like 2 or 3 months. I just need 2 or 3 months without work, to rest. First of all, to rest. I knew I needed rest as much as I needed anything else.
Right. I didn't have
To
the kids
rest
to
and
deal with.
just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-mm. Yeah. That's it.
to have time to think, to have the space to think. And you know what? A couple of weeks into it, I'm like, 3 months is not enough. So I made the commitment to myself. I'm going to give myself at least 6 months. I need 6 months to just recover from everything that I've been through these past couple of years, recover from being a full-time working parent with so many responsibilities, both at work and at home. And I'm going to use the time to also just do things that I like to do, or do things that maybe I didn't have the chance to do before, because I didn't have the time. So, well, once I made that decision in my head that it was going to be 6 months, I want to enjoy the holiday season. I want to be with my family. I want to be present, in the lives of the people that I love. Um, that was my mindset, and I think so that's why for me it was easy to be like, put the boundaries up, because this is the space that I want to be in now.
Now, you and I both experienced the same job, right? We experienced intensity, and we worked on big projects for years. I remember I wanted to go. Okay, side note here, folks. I wanted to go work for Cristina years ago and another one of our colleagues. And I was ready to do what I needed to do to go work for these two, and I was turned down. So they didn't want me. I had to stay in my old job. Eventually, the universe conspired and we started working on projects together. We worked in the same department, and I'm very proud of the work that we all did. So we understand the pressures of the job, and I don't mean pressure in a negative way. Everything has a certain level of pressure. We're now changed by that. I'm looking for something, and I'm working on something that's completely different. And how can I take my energy and use it for good? Use it for leadership. Use it for talking about leadership. But I'm not interested in the big. I'm not interested in replicating what we had, because I don't think you get bigger than what we had. I mean, that was intense. And you did it for over a decade. I did it for a couple of decades plus, and that's intense. Talk about, because I love the way you said it, talk about that you're ready for a big thing, a medium thing, a small thing, along with, I want to work from home, I want hybrid. Tell me, what are you thinking? Because I know you don't want to just step back into what you used to do necessarily.
Right. Yeah, no, you know, the greatest blessing that I've had the past couple months is that space to really reflect and think and strategize about what steps I want to take, what career I want next. And, at first, again, things change when you have the time to reflect on them. At first, I thought, oh, you know what? These like remote roles is really attractive. Maybe I want to do something that's fully remote. I can work from home. I could be in my own space. And after a while, one thing that I realized that I missed about being at the museum and being part of a team is that in-person interaction, is that sense of like
Right.
the feeling of the culture that you get from a place by being there. And I know for me, as I'm looking at what's next, I'm prioritizing being somewhere in person, because I know that that's the space where I will do the best, the type of work environment where I'll really be able to thrive. I need kind of that separation of being present when I'm at home with my family and being present at work when I'm in a physically different space. And so that was a big revelation for me, because I thought in the beginning, totally, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing an in-person 5-day a week job for 12 years. I would love the chance to do something hybrid or remote. And then I realized that's not who I am. I'm an in-person people connector. I love thriving off the energy of a space. And so, that's one of the things that I came to the conclusion of during this time where I've had the chance to really think about my next steps. So in person, I love being part of a team. I love working with people. I love things that are customer, client facing. That's my background, and I still want to stay along that thread.
So how do you, as a young woman raising two beautiful young men, how are you having conversations at home? Because I think that's really super interesting. Then I'm going to ask the audience here to send in some questions. How do you explain it to them, right? You lived in one place, you moved them to another. Mom doesn't go out every day the way she used to. Now she wants to go out again. How do you explain it to young kids who get used to a routine?
Oh, totally. And you know what? My oldest especially loved the fact that I worked at the museum, and he was quite disappointed when I said,
I
"Mom,
saw
you
a
wouldn't be
photo.
working at the
You drew a
museum anymore," because
picture.
it's a cool job.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
exactly.
totally cool job. I got to take them to the museum a couple of times and do behind the scenes stuff, and it was it was amazing. And so that was hard, because I think that's another thing about working at such an iconic place, is that so much of your identity is tied into what you do for your job, right? And if, to leave that all behind and to make the decision that, you're going to try something different is a big deal. And it's a big deal for people around you too, who are used to identifying you with that.
Um, did this happen to you? Probably not, because you're more mature and smarter than I am. But when I left, I wanted to erase my past. I was going to be this new creature, this new thing, and what I did in my past just didn't matter. And then, of course, our past comes up, and because the Met is so iconic and it's just so known, I mean, it immediately conjures up all sorts of emotions and images with people. I started to realize none of us can erase our past. And so I started to then go through it all, thinking of everything I did, all the people I knew, all the guests that we dealt with. They're all part of me somehow. So you take the best of all of that. And so that's interesting, right? Because when I was younger, my nieces and nephews used to call it Uncle Will's Museum. right? It wasn't the Met, it was Uncle Will's museum. So it's
Right.
mommy's museum, right? I'm sure it's mommy.
Totally. And that's what they would say, mom's museum. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. Well, like you said, like it was an adjustment to explain what was happening to the kids and that mommy's on a break. But you know, we've also developed new routines that have been really fun. And you know, I just crack up because again, my oldest makes me laugh so much. You know, at one point he was like, "Mom, are you ever going to go back to work?" Like he couldn't wait to get rid of me. But it's been so nice to have the extra time with them for sure. And I think just explaining things at their level that they can understand and normalizing this concept of like, you know, you go through different phases in your life and different periods in your life. And that's something that's good for, I think, kids to see too.
We've got an international audience here, so I always suggest that any guest who's been here after the broadcast, you could look at the replay, go through the comments because this is such a community. I just love these folks. There's so many great Michelle, David, Mariah, Byron, Shri. There's a million people here, and I get uncomfortable mentioning names because I always forget one. But Mikkel, who is from Austria today, his question is a good one, and want to know your take on it. What are the cons to taking a career break?
Sure. Well, I think we're coming out of this perception or mindset, but for a long time, like taking a career break, there is that apprehension that when you're ready to start looking for a job again, how do you explain it? How do you explain a 6-month gap? How do you explain why you decided to leave a job,
Right.
why you needed the time off? But again, I from what I've seen and even some initial conversations that I have, there's not that much stigma around it anymore. I think there's a very understanding community out there that gets it, gets why it's healthy, gets why it's good. I would say the other con to taking a break might just be how you feel about yourself. I think you really have to
Oh,
approach it with an openness, and it's okay to be a little bit anxious about what's next. It's okay to be a little bit unsure. It's okay to not exactly know which direction you're going in the beginning of your break too. So I think there's a lot of that internal thinking and self-reflection that you have to be comfortable with all of the uncomfortable feelings you're going to have. And that's
that,
definitely part of it.
and that's one of the things you're always so balanced, right? And you know, I'm complimenting you because you deserve it. But that was one of the things that I always appreciated most, and the team appreciated most, because it was like, yeah. But you could go to Christina, and you would also get her because you're human. At least I
Yeah.
think you're human. I'm sure you're human. Um, but having that way to look at things properly, I'm such a fan of your generation, right? And I think that was one of the things we first learned. We worked with someone who talked about millennials all the time. Like
Yes.
I look at yeah. But one of the things, forget the title or the label on a generation, is the thoughtfulness and how a generation different from my own that I grew up in, these kinds of breaks and focusing on yourself and well-being and mental health, these are all important, nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that was part of the reason I even went and had this conversation today, is because we have to start making that normal. We have to say it's okay to say no. I was, what, 56 years old when I realized I could actually use the word no. It wasn't in my vocabulary because I was so groomed to say yes. So I love to say everybody else but myself. Tell me, what does someone who's done what you've done and all the experience you have, what does going out there look like? 12 years in an organization is a very long time. We grow comfortable when we're in a place for a very long time, and it's somewhat home, right? All the characters are extended relatives in a way. How do you go back out there and start interviewing? What's that been like? Have you started that? Because I'm sure there are people watching who would want some tips on okay, I'm back out there. What do
Yeah.
you do?
Well, I have started putting myself out there, and again, it's one of those things where you have to be okay with the vulnerability of it, right? Because putting yourself out there and openly saying, I'm open to work, I want to connect with people, I want to look for opportunities that might be the right fit for me. um, I think there's a lot that's intimidating about that, and I think just approaching it, understanding that you're going to have to pivot along the way, and you might have to adapt as you go along. And the second thing that I would say is that it's all about the relationships that you have with people. And this is something that I can't be overstated enough.
Right.
It's so important to like reach out to the people in your network and be open. Hey, I'm looking for work. This
Yeah.
is what I'm looking for. And just having those conversations and being really transparent, I think that's where you're going to get the most fruitful kind of interactions is by approaching it that way. But
Because
it's intimidating, and it's incredibly makes you feel really vulnerable.
and and what I love about what I've been doing in this time since my former life, this weekly show or being able to do this, the best part about it was the best part of any job I ever had. And that was just connecting with people, talking with
Mhm.
people, introducing people to one another. I think that is super, super important. And while it seems like, yeah, everybody's on social media and people can do things, it's not easy to connect with people. You're someone who's an empathetic leader. And maybe you can describe this better than I can, but you know when someone's a really good manager or a team member, you can see certain skills,
Mhm.
right? You know people will get the work done, they'll be great with customers and other colleagues. But it's rare, it's been rare for me that you actually meet empathetic leaders. And what I mean by that is everything you just said, being vulnerable, not knowing the answers, but being human, being kind and connecting in such a way. You have that. I see it and I feel it. I can't put it into words. How would you describe um, finding that in someone else? Because you're an incredible recruiter, mentor. You've done all of these things. What do you look for in an empathetic leader? How do you know the person's got the it factor?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. Well, I'm not sure it's just one thing. But the best thing that any of us can do when we're meeting new people or having conversations and trying to connect is be a good listener. And I think you really have to hear people's stories, and hear what they're telling you, what they're trying to convey, and see if they're good listeners too. Because that to me is a sign of an empathetic leader, is someone who, as much as they enjoy sharing about themselves, are they also good listeners? Are they asking you questions about yourself? Are they interested in you? There has to be that kind of like natural back and forth. And you know what? The other telltale sign, it is how people respond to situations, and whether or not the choices that they're making are putting other people as the priority, as first. And that's really challenging to do, right? It's super hard when there's so many other, whether it be business priorities or needs that have to happen. And trust me, I've made tons of mistakes along the way and prioritized the wrong things. And I think at the end of the day, someone who's empathetic will figure out a way how to get those super critical things done while bringing their team along with them, while lifting the team up and supporting the team along the way. And again, that's easy. That sounds so simple, but it's not. But that for me is definitely the sign of an empathetic leader.
Byron, hi Byron, hi Mariah. I tune in tomorrow, folks. I'll be in a car somewhere off the side of the road on their show. We're going to be talking about kindness. Byron emphasizes that as well. Listen to what they're not saying, right?
Absolutely, Byron. Yes. listen to what
right?
they're not saying. Yep.
Really, really have to do that. I'm sure I've missed a ton of people because the chat, so the comments are so active. But our old colleague Armando, also known as Alfredo, says hello. It's always so nice when some of the old gang pops up and just says hi. So good to see you, Armando. Hope you're still
Hi,
giving that great
Alfredo.
customer service. Let's see. Okay. I'm looking at the clock because I try to keep this to half hour or so. Let's talk about um, visualizing, how do you say, manifesting. What does the summer of 2023 look like for Cristina? What's your ideal job day? What does it look like? So you could start to visualize it, right? You took the break.
Sure.
What does 4th of July weekend look like for you?
Well, 4th of July weekend definitely is barbecue somewhere with family and eating some good food. But I would say, in terms of the summer in general, I would really look forward to, having a job somewhere local to me by then, where I'm going into work every day, doing something that's creative, utilizing my customer service skills, working with a team, and then spending the rest of the time doing fun summer stuff. I think, part of what the whole purpose of why I took a break was to establish that balance and make sure I'm spending the right amount of time doing things that were professionally stimulating and challenging, but also recognizing that I always need to leave space for the people in my life that are important to me. So I think when I visualize summer, that's what it is. It's having a job local. I think working with a much smaller team, as much as I loved the
Right.
team at the museum, I think working somewhere that's more intimate is definitely what I'm looking for next.
That's super interesting because I go back and forth between I'm never going to work again and I'm just going to be in a cave somewhere and not talk to anybody, to wanting to fill up a stadium so I can feel the energy of a crowd. So I'm working on both of them, but like you, the time away, I stopped. So I took projects and I did tons of things in 2022. Right, this is 2020. I did tons of things in 2022. I took a page out of the Cristina Ambroselli book. I purposely said from Thanksgiving until New Year's, I wouldn't work. And it
Mhm.
was the first break I'd taken, and I wrote about this the other day. It's the first break I took from not working or doing something since the summer of 1982. So I know you weren't born then, but since the summer of 1982, so there I was. I worked 40 years nonstop. So instead of beating myself up because I was doing that, I did too much. I should have did this. I shouldn't have done that. I said yes too many times. I thought to myself, wow, hey, to take 6 weeks to decompress after 40 years, I don't think that's such a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing at all.
Not at
I,
all.
I think because this topic is about career breaks, well, I truly hope anybody that's in the HR realm and the recruiting realm watching this or watching the recording of this to start to think about this, not those gaps. Everything that you said earlier, people need to stop. People need to assess. People need to understand what they are, what drives them. And we can't necessarily figure any of that out when we're always on the go, when we're always moving. And I get criticized sometimes because people will say, well, you're lucky enough that you can do that. And yes, I admit that. I recognize that. I am blessed. You too are blessed. Not everyone is blessed with the opportunity. So we're not just trying to tell people that just take a break and say, but you take the steps to do what you can do. And I don't know. That's really what I just wanted to say here as we start wrapping it up, and I have you have the final word. Um, how what can we do and how do we continue to have the conversation allow people to take that break? And so I'm a big supporter of it. I'm so glad that I know someone like you and many others who have done it. who do it proudly. And my good friend Michelle here in the comments had actually said, no one's going to know you're looking for work unless you tell them. In the
Absolutely.
past, right, it was quietly sending resumes or whispering, is there a job? No, you just boldly say, hey, I'm looking for work. Does anybody know? Those are great things. What do you want to leave those watching here today or watching the replay? What do you want to leave them with in terms of everything that you learned in your journey?
Sure. I think it was so, again, like you said, a privilege that I was able to take 6 months off to strategize and to focus my energies on what I wanted to do next. But, I think that there are also maybe smaller ways in our daily lives that we can give ourselves the space to be strategic about what we want and to really put our efforts towards something that is going to be um, impactful and fulfilling, even if that means you can't leave your current position or you have other constraints around it. And I think this is something that I've been trying to work on for a really long time. I mean, Will, earlier when you said you're the person who can't say no, I've been working on this for my whole life too, as setting up those boundaries
Right.
and not being the person to just automatically say yes to everything, and being thoughtful and being intentional. And I think, great if you can take that career break. I applaud the people who do. I know how beneficial it is from having just done it myself. But for those that can't, just living your life in a way that you are intentional about the steps that you're taking and the direction that you're going, and cut yourself some slack too. Make sure you make space to relax.
You said that so well, because you and I do have something very much in common, and that we're people pleasers, or we were people pleasers, because, and I don't necessarily think that it's not a good thing, but the intention of working in the public realm, hosting large events, bringing in people, it's the right approach because you are trying to be welcoming and gracious. You talked about it today. How do you set those boundaries up?
Mhm.
Because you want to be gracious, you want to put on the best show, you want to welcome millions of people into your venue each year, right? You want to do all of these things, but how do you take the time along the way, your own boundaries, set up some you time, and when the time is right, you're going to know when it's time to go on to your next thing in this world.
Absolutely. And it will allow you to even, I think, succeed in the things that you do want to do, right? With your career, with your profession, whatever it is that you're doing. If you're not operating from a place of like being centered, and being focused, it's going to impact your work too, right? And I think that that's also important to realize.
So, Cristina, we've reached the end of our half an hour here, and I just want to say thank you for having the conversation with me. I want anybody who's watching this or watching the replay to know that Christina's on the market. She, she's she's putting up her marquee. She's ready to go back out there, and I really want to be able to support you and anybody that's watching to find that sense of joy, find that next big, medium, or small
Or
thing.
small thing. Yep.
The thing that's going to bring you joy, the thing that's going to light you up, then you get to go home to your family and be the best Cristina there is, right? Because you're fulfilled and they see you fulfilled. So that's everything. So thank you for the conversation today. And people can find you on LinkedIn, right?
That's right.
You're very much on LinkedIn. I suggest you connect with the worldwide audience in the comments later. You can go through the comments and make sure you connect with everybody. And I try to end with my favorite quote: find out who you are and do it on purpose. And this is from Dolly Parton. We may have some Dolly Parton fans out there, but this is something that I really take to heart because it is something that we work on constantly. Just figure out who you are, just keep working at it, and cut yourself some break, some slack. And the plug for next week, I don't know what you're doing next week, Cristina, but I'm doing an audio event, and my big topic that I'm exploring in the year 2023 is nice versus kind. I used to be Mr. Nice Guy. I didn't realize I was kind until I stopped being nice. So I'm doing an open format. So if you're available at noon next week, take the mic. It won't be video, but I'll open up the stage to talk about that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, thanks so much. Well, looking forward to that. And also just thank you so much for inviting me today. And thank you to everyone who was able to join. And hopefully more people will be able to catch this later.
Thank you, Cristina. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and looking forward to more kindness in the world and talking about more career breaks as time goes by.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Thanks, Cristina.